Hey, what's up guys, this is Woastanovkize, and on Monday something very bad happened. There were a few police departments investigating me, and they finally caught up to me, and they basically forced me to shut down my channel. So I just wanted to talk about how it happened, how it started, and why it's all coming to an end. So my first few videos, I was just hopping on the CSX line. I didn't really get very many views, and it didn't really matter since a bunch of other people had already done it. So I wanted to do something more extreme that would get more views. So I had heard about a few people train hopping across the Canadian border, but no one actually recorded and uploaded it. So I thought, well, if I do that, then I'll get lots of views, and my channel can actually finally start to grow and become very large, kind of like Shay and Aaliyah Bondwell. I wanted to be like them. So that's what I did. I went to a train yard in Saratoga, found out that a train leaves at night, goes to Montreal. So I hopped on the train, recorded it, uploaded it, and that video got a lot of wanted attention, but also a lot of unwanted attention. So a bunch of people were saying that they were going to report me to Canadian Pacific, the FBI, Border Patrol, and a few other agencies, and so I didn't really take them seriously until after I made that Amtrak video. I uploaded it, and a few days later I was laying in bed with my girlfriend, and I hear this very loud, aggressive knock on my door. And I say to her, don't answer it, because I basically knew right away that it was going to be a cop. You know, no one else knocks on doors like that. And then he knocks on my neighbor's door and says, hey, I'm looking for, and then he says my first and last name. And he has his truck parked across the street. And he stands near his truck and calls me on my phone. And at the time I didn't know it was him. I thought maybe it was just one of my neighbors warning me, saying, hey, there's a cop knocking on your door. So I pick up my phone and say hello. He's like, hey, is this? And he says my first and last name. And I don't respond to that. I say, who are you? And he says, my name's such and such. I forget what it was, but he says he's with the CP Railway Police Department, and he's trying to figure out if I'm home. And I ask him a bunch of questions, and he says, you can open the door or I'll get a search warrant. And he says that he knows he has the right person, and I'm like, I think you have the wrong number. And I'm like, well, where'd you get this number from? He says, from the Utica Police Department, when you were trying to go to Chicago. So in my first video, I was trying to go to Chicago. The cops in Utica stopped me, and they're like, we'll let you go if you give us your info. So I give them my info, and they let me go. And I trusted them not to give that information away. And I didn't think the cops would actually go far enough to call the Utica Police Department and get my information from them, but I guess it's what they did. And I try to act like I did nothing wrong, and then he's like, I know I have the right person. I said, no, you don't, and hang up. Oh yeah, and also there was an Amtrak cop on the line as well, like an Amtrak cop and a CP Railway cop both called me. So then I'm like, they'll never get that search warrant. But I packed a bag and stayed at one of my friends' places, spent the night there. The next day I called my neighbors, and they're like, no one searched your apartment. So then I head back home, and I'm like, okay, that's the end of it, you know. I'm really not worth your time. And then I made my Greenfield video, uploaded that, my truck surfing video, and then so then I wanted to make the best video I ever made for my last video of the year, because the weather was getting cold and I can't keep train hopping during the winter. So I wanted to end it with the grand finale, essentially. Until the springtime, when the weather became warm again, I'd start train hopping. And so I went to Fjordbush on the west side of the Selkirk Yard and I was trying to go to Buffalo. That was going to be a stop along the way, and from there I would get off in Buffalo and go somewhere else. And so I wait for like 2 hours, and I start getting bored, so I do some parkour on the bridge. And then I see this cop leave this road that's basically only used for the train company. I'm not sure if it's public or private, but I thought that was very strange, but I don't think much of it until 3 cops show up with their lights on and stop on the bridge. And I had my stuff on the other side of the guardrail, and before I even tell them who I am, they know about my YouTube channel. There were a bunch of people driving past me wearing bright green reflective vests. So I basically knew they worked for the train company, but I thought, oh, well, it doesn't matter. But I guess one of them must have recognized me. They're like, oh, wait, that's Woastanovkize. He's probably going to hop on one of our trains. Because I was actually starting to become kind of popular at this point. I had already ran into one of my fans while hanging out under a train bridge. Someone had actually watched my videos, and he's probably actually watching this video right now, actually. And he and I had never met before, and he knew who I was, so I thought that was really cool. But I guess some people driving past must have known who I was as well. And so the cops say, someone called 911 because they saw you a suicide jump and going to jump off the bridge, which I'm assuming they made that up. I don't think anyone actually called 911 because the bridge was only like 30 feet tall. It wouldn't have killed anyone from jumping off it. And they are basically like, well, we can't leave you here. We can drive you to a gas station. And anyways, so I'm like, no, I just want to stay here. And then an intermodal train starts going by. So I'm like, I need to get my stuff and go. And they're like, no, we can't let you. And I keep trying to grab my stuff on the other side of the guardrail. And they're like, you're going to be placed in handcuffs if you don't sit on the guardrail. And so then the train goes by. I'm super mad at them for making me miss my train, and I would now have to wait like another 4 hours for the next one. And then they're like, well, we can't leave you here. Where do you want to go? And I'm like, to that gas station within the eyesight. Because I'm like, well, once they drive me there, I'll just grab my stuff and head back to the bridge and wait for the next train. So they drove me to the Stewart's gas station, and they don't let me out of their car. They call in a mobile crisis team, even though it was clear that I wasn't going to jump off the bridge. They knew who I was, they knew what I was going to do, and they mentioned the Canadian Pacific police phone number. So I'm like, oh no, they're going to try to probably charge me with all the crimes I committed on my YouTube channel. But I guess they weren't able to find the right phone number. Was what I sought at the time, but what actually happened was something totally different that I'll explain later. And so then these 4 people show up. They're not cops, they are part of the crisis team, and they're like, oh, if we let you go, where will you go? And I'm like, I'll just stay here. And they're like, you can't stay here. And I'm like, yeah, I can. I sleep outside all the time. And they're like, it's going to go below freezing tonight. And I'm like, yeah, I have an army sleeping bag. I'll easily survive the night. And anyways, so then they're like, well, since I can't come up with a safe plan, you're going to have to go with her. And she points to this cop, and she's like, she'll take you to a place that's warm, and you'll be there for a few days, talk to a few people. And I'm like, I know what you're hinting at. My insurance isn't going to cover that. And she made it clear that I didn't have a choice. And then the cop tries to like push me into a car, and I basically wasn't moving at all. I was not getting in a car, and after a few attempts, the people are like, okay, well, we'll let me talk to these guys, and then and then the 4 regular people from the crisis team regroup, and then there's another cop shows up, and altogether there were 4 cops, but then 2 of them took off, but then like one of them came back, and so like while they were while the cop was trying to push me into a car, I'm like, well, can I just go home? Because like at the time I really didn't want to get sent to any like mental institute place or anything like that, because no one does, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just trying to go to Buffalo, and I tell them that, and that was probably a very big mistake, telling them that I wanted to go to Buffalo, and I'll cover that later. And so then the crisis team is like, oh, well, at first we thought we couldn't come up with a safe plan, but if you go with her back to your apartment, then we can all just go home. And so and she's like, I could force you to go somewhere that you don't want to, and I'm like, under what law? And she's like, the New York State mental hygiene law, which I had heard of before, but I didn't think it applied so broadly. It seems very unconstitutional how all I was trying to do was travel, and they were trying to obstruct that using the law, which shouldn't have even been considered here. So I basically get in a car just so I can get my backpack and longboard, and then she takes me to my apartment. I get out, and the first thing I do is grab $1.50 and skateboard back to a bus stop, then go to Fewer Bush and head to Buffalo. Okay, so in the end, all we did is waste each other's time, and a lot of time actually, like multiple hours. And so I get off the train in Buffalo, and I go someplace that I had never been to before, and I can't tell you guys where I went to, just because of what happened on Monday, which I'll get to later. And then basically, so I get to see so many cool things I had never seen before. It was the best weekend of my life. I had an amazing time, and I recorded it as well. It was going to be the best video on my channel. And so then I make it back to Buffalo, and I woke up on Monday at like 9 a.m. at the Frontier Yard. And by now I'm like very exhausted. This has been the longest adventure I've ever been on, and I just want to go home, and because I had been very hungry, dehydrated, exhausted, sleep deprived, and if I made it back home, I could finally end this adventure and get back to normal. So I could have rode a freight train, but I decide, well, I should just buy an Amtrak train and get back home as soon as I can. And so then I walk to the DePeel station at the edge of Buffalo, because there's 2 Amtrak stations, one in downtown Buffalo, one at the edge of Buffalo. And so I walked to the one at the edge because that one was closer. And I try to buy a ticket, and they're like, well, you don't have ID. And he's like, I can't sell you a ticket without ID, which had never happened to me before. I bought like 10 Amtrak tickets previously, and they never really asked for ID. One time they did make me sign, but I was using a fake name, so I just signed a fake name. That was well, I can't tell you guys where that was either. But anyway, so I tried to message some people to see if they can buy me a ticket, and then I pay them back the next time I see them. Then they email me the ticket, and I just use that to survive the train. But then half an hour later, I go back to the station, do a 270 around it, and an employee walks out and says he'll sell me a ticket without ID this time, but next time I'll have to have ID. So I buy a ticket, pay in cash, give him a fake name, to Albany, and then I get on the train, and right away I go inside the bathroom and lock the door. Okay, this was the Maple Leaf. I had never rode the Maple Leaf before, and this was like 300 miles from where I live, so I thought they're not going to recognize me, like a lot of people in my local area know who I am, especially if they're involved with trains, you know, like the train companies, and a lot of the local cops know who I am, but I'm like, no one in Buffalo is going to be able to spot me. But I guess the Bethlehem cops must have told the Amtrak or Canadian Pacific cop or maybe even this anti-terrorism agency about me, that I was going to Buffalo. And so they must have said, hey, if you recognize this guy, call us. And sent them a picture of me, probably with my eyes blurred out. But anyway, so before I exit the bathroom, I take my headphones off, put my hood up, I put this coronavirus mask on. And so I'm like, okay, they're not going to recognize me. I thought about getting off in Schenectady and taking a bus back to Albany just to avoid detection. But I'm like, it won't really matter because the investigation has probably died down and they're not going to recognize me with my hood up, my mask on, and my headphones off. So then as I step onto the boarding platform, this cop says my first name and says, put your hands on here, you're under arrest. And then he's like, do you have that handcuff key you had in your videos? And I don't respond, I just remain silent. He reaches into my back pocket and takes out the handcuff key. At this point, he knows for sure who I am. You know, he recognized me by my large backpack, my sweatshirt, and once he saw that I'm wearing the same shoes, I have the headphones in my backpack that I have in all my videos, I have that handcuff key in my back pocket, there's no way I could deny that I was Woastanovkize. He knew 100% who I was. And then he puts handcuffs on me and switches, and then there's like 4 or 5 cops there. They switch through my backpack, and I actually had evidence of where I went in this sub pocket. You know how whoa on even ground. Like this is like miniature pocket behind on the right pocket on jeans. Well, I actually had evidence of where I went and what I did there, but they didn't check that sub pocket. So as a side note, guys, if you ever have something you want to hide, always put it there, because I was once in this car crash and my femur was snapped in half and I hit my head really hard, so they put me in like 4 or 5 different scanning machines, and they took everything out of my pockets to make sure I didn't have anything metal. But then the machines wouldn't work because I had keys in that sub pocket, and they didn't even think to check that. And so eventually they did check that once I told them to check it, but like whenever you get switched, no one ever checks that sub pocket. So it's a great place to stash stuff. Okay, so back to the story. They take my handcuff key and my phones and all the money I had, and then they walk over to this elevator because the Amtrak station in Albany actually has an elevator. So at first I'm like, I paid for my ticket. You shouldn't treat customers like this, you know, just trying to act like I did nothing wrong. But then one of the cops says, I know you paid for it. And then in the elevator, I'm like, maybe you should just let me go, you know, less paperwork. And I'm like, I wasn't doing anything wrong, I was just going on adventures. And one of the cops says, well, your adventures need to stop. So someone could very easily get hurt, and most likely you. And so then they put me in the back of this cop car, close the door, and I see there's this Canadian Pacific truck. So I'm like, oh no, I'm in a lot of trouble. And then they drove me to the Rensselaer police station because the Albany Amtrak station is actually not in Albany, it's across the Hudson River in Rensselaer. It's not even in the same county. And I thought this was kind of strange because I hadn't broke any laws in Rensselaer. So I'm like, well, if they're going to charge me for crimes I committed in Selkirk, they'll have to take me to the nearest police station to Selkirk. But it turns out they actually didn't want to charge me with any crimes, or otherwise they probably would have drove me to all these police stations where I did all of these things and charged me one by one. And at first I'm not answering any of their questions. I'm just staring at the floor, at this one spot without moving. And one of the cops says, if you keep being unresponsive like you're in a coma, you'll have to go to the hospital. And then after a while he gives up trying to question me, and then this other cop starts to try to question me. At first he's like, what's your favorite color? And finally, after like 10 minutes, I say, I did nothing wrong. People in Russia and Mexico do what I did every day without running into any trouble. And he says, well, this isn't Russia or Mexico. And I asked him who he was and why he's here. He's like, and then he says he's an anti-terrorism cop. And he's been investigating me for a few weeks. And I'm like, how many hours have you spent investigating me? And he's like, almost none, because I have people who do it for me. And then he basically tries to ask me questions to figure out, like, do I have access to firearms, explosives, and if I'm going to commit any acts of violence. And I basically just convince him that I'm a normal person and I'm not a terrorist. And then he basically leaves after like an hour and says, okay, I'll type a report that says you're not going to be a terrorist and my job is complete. And he leaves. But then the Amtrak cop and the Canadian Pacific cop were still there. And the Amtrak cop seemed a lot better at his job than the Canadian Pacific cop. And they say they can arrest me, but they'll let me go if I sign this paper. And they're like, well, if you do anything like this again, upload any of these videos to your channel, it will be very easy to figure out who you are. And when we catch you again, you're not going to be going home. So they're essentially saying, like, I get a one-time, like, get out of jail free card. Okay, that they're giving me. And they're not going to make any of this information available to the public. Thank God. But then he picks up my phone and says, what does this say? Well, read that right there. And it was a comment on one of my videos left by this user named Amtrak. And the comment said, he was just arrested in Albany, New York. And I'm like, how do they know about that? And he's like, I didn't tell anyone. He's like, someone must have seen you walking to the station. And then the Amtrak cop asks me, how's the walk from Hudson to Rensselaer? I say it was terrible. And then I'm like, how did they know I was on the train? And he's like, well, someone must have saw you. And I'm like, did someone on the ground see me or did someone on the train see me? And he's like, well, I can't tell you that. You know, there's some things you don't want to tell me. Well, that's one thing that I don't want to tell you. Then I asked the Canadian Pacific cop if I showed up on the X-ray machine when he checked it. And he's like, I can't tell you that. And then after like an hour, the Amtrak cop uses my handcuff key to unlock the handcuff on my left arm. And he's like, you're not getting this back. And he gave all my stuff back except for my two phones. The two phones were taken as evidence. I'm not sure if I'm going to get my phones back. And he said, you might get your phones back, but you're not getting this handcuff key back. And so then we talked for a while, and he knew about that interaction I had in Bethlehem. So that's how he must have known I went to Buffalo, and he must have told the Buffalo cops, hey, if you recognize this guy, call us. And I guess the reason why I didn't get charged or like caught in Bethlehem was because the Canadian Pacific cop couldn't get to his phone in time. The phone number was correct, but he didn't answer it, and so I basically got off scot-free for a little while, which was very good because then I actually went on the best adventure of my entire life and went to that really cool place that I can't tell you guys about, and I'll probably never upload that to YouTube. I don't even have my phone, so I don't even have the video files, but even if I did, I still wouldn't want to go to jail for anything. So the future of my channel, I'll probably turn this into a hacking channel or a pranking channel. I haven't really decided yet. I'm one of the only few people in the entire world who know how to hack Wi-Fi passwords. And I can do it very well. I'm very good at it. As long as I hack my own Wi-Fi password, it won't be illegal. I'm also one of the few people in the entire world who knows how to hack phones to get free phone service. Unlimited call, text, and Google searches on the T-Mobile network. I'll also make a video on that. I'll try to make my Wi-Fi hacking video within like 2 weeks from now, so stay tuned for that. But I can't go on any more adventures, otherwise I'll get arrested and go to jail and get a criminal record, and then the FTRA members will be able to track me down and kill me, because then it will be public record, you know. So I can't really do that anymore. I had a good run though. I was expecting to get away with it for a little bit longer, but they finally caught up to me. And at the time I'm like, I'm so stupid for taking the Amtrak train. I should have just taken a freight train back to Albany. But then I found out the next day at work that the security officers where I work actually talked to my boss and tried to basically say, if he shows up to work, call us. I wasn't at work that day. I had to call in sick because I couldn't make it back in time. I was sleeping at the Buffalo Yard on that Monday when it occurred, so I wasn't at work, but they would have tried to apprehend me there if I actually showed up. So the only way I could have avoided any sort of repercussions is if I had just basically never left my apartment or exited to a secret tunnel, because they would have waited outside my apartment eventually if I kept doing this for me to leave, and realistically I just couldn't avoid them forever. So I was expecting to get away with a little bit more, grow my channel a little bit more. During the last 2 months, my channel has just blown up, you know, like my subscribers have doubled, my subscriber count has, and I'm actually getting a decent amount of comments, like 20 or 30 per video now. So please don't unsubscribe. My videos will still be entertaining, they just won't be in the same category. And luckily, I'm not going to have to go in front of a judge and do any of the other boring stuff like that you might expect to happen for someone in my situation. So I guess I was given a second chance, and I'm not going to blow it. I'm actually going to try to focus more on my actual real life, building my career, because these adventures have just taken a lot of time out of my life, and it's just been very hard for me to make these videos, but I'm going to make videos that are easier for me to make now, not because I want to, but because I'm being forced to by the cops. Okay, so it was the Anti-terrorism agency that really sped up the investigation, got them the resources they needed to track me down. The Amtrak cops and the Canadian Pacific cops, they might have been able to do it, but it would have been harder for them to without the Anti-terrorism agency. The anti-terrorist guy, he had all my medical records, a copy of everything I ever posted online. He knew every place I ever lived. He knew everything about me, even from like when I was a little kid. Like, these anti-terrorism guys do not mess around. They have much more power than regular cops do, and if you're ever being investigated by one, then you might as well just turn yourself in. Okay, that's my advice. And also, do not hop on the Canadian Pacific line. If you do, just don't upload it to YouTube. Also, don't train surf on Amtrak trains. The CSX line is probably okay because the cops were not involved with this case at all. They had nothing to do with it, even though I hopped on a bunch of their trains, and I only hopped on one Canadian Pacific train, and I only surfed on one Amtrak train, and they got all over me for it. So I guess this is the end of my adventures. I can still go on legal adventures, but that'll be boring. It won't really be worth making those types of videos. Like, it'll just be a waste of my time. So I'm going to try to make hacking videos and eventually pranking videos. So please don't unsubscribe. I'll do a better job at not getting caught now. But they caught up to me and I couldn't really do anything about it. So I'll see you guys later.